Instead of being emotionally crippled by an experience, we can come through it with hearts that have become more grateful, more generous, and more genuinely responsive to the people God puts in our day-to-day paths. I stand here today with a heart that's not only still physically beating because you saved my life, but also with a heart that's emotionally tenderized as a result of the compassion my family and I were shown while you were saving my life. Today is my opportunity to say thank you. My name is Mike Center, patient number 101000932883, transported to SSM St. Clare Health Center in Fenton, Missouri by air evac in the early morning hours of November 1st, 2014. During the flight, my heart had already stopped once and defibrillated back to a stable rhythm. I say this now only to convey the poor condition of the patients you had received. As I felt myself being wheeled down the ER hallway, I just had enough presence of mind to know it based on years as a paramedic that I was in big trouble. Although I have no further conscious memories of the next 6 days, my wife, Pat, my family, and her staff filled in a lot of missing details. My heart had stopped again shortly after arriving at the ER. By all accounts, cardiologist Dr. Anish Thomas went to heroic lengths to get me back. I don't know specifically what heroic means, but I know I'm grateful that he did not give up on me. By the time Dr. Thomas came out to report, Pat was in the chapel, so he spoke with her son and daughter-in-law, Al and Chrissy. As a firefighter himself, Al knew the significance of 2 defibrillations within a short time, so he was braced for the worst. They described Dr. Thomas as looking like he'd fought for the battle of his life, crumpled, sweaty, worn out, as he leaned against the wall. He told the kids that it was one of the most damaged hearts he'd worked on, and that he hadn't been sure they'd get me back this time, and they haven't done so wasn't a guarantee that I would continue to pull through. Gently but very solemnly, Dr. Thomas advised the kids to prepare Pat because the odds of me living through the next day weren't very good. Al and Chrissy said they immediately loved Dr. Thomas for having fought so valiantly, for succeeding, and then expressing reality with such compassion. It was Dr. David Theodore who later sat with Pat, Al, and Chrissy to patiently answer questions explaining what we were facing. If I lived through the next 24 hours, I ultimately needed a triple bypass. My heart was far too weak to make it through surgery right then. They had managed to implant temporary stents, which they had hoped would last long enough for me to regain enough strength for surgery to be a safe option. It wasn't an optimistic scenario, but Dr. Theodora managed to leave them with hope that it was at least possible. He gave his assurance that St. Clare's team would continue doing everything they could. I won't go into all the fever spikes and medical issues the team effectively maneuvered me through over the next 5 days. Suffice to say, it was a tough journey, and one I'm glad I was unconscious for. Of course, my loved ones weren't so lucky. They sat helplessly listening to every beep of the machines, watching every look that crossed the faces of staff caring for me. Prayer comes easily and earnestly at those times. Prayer for patients' recovery, prayer for wisdom and skill for the staff. And God must have been listening, because you guys did it. Kept me alive. But here's where I want to digress from the phenomenal medical achievement you pulled off. I said earlier that I was patient number 10100932883. But one of the most beautiful and impressive things about SSM is that without exception, I wasn't just treated like a person in patient whatever room. I was a real person, as were my family members. Examples, starting at the beginning, Pat was alone in the ER cardiac cath waiting area when the code blue call was paged overhead. The ER front desk receptionist immediately left her post and came to Pat and said, "I know you heard that. And I want you to know that your husband is in the best possible place for this to happen." It wasn't even this woman's job, but she knew how frightened another human being must have been, so she reached out with comfort. Later, in the middle of my first night in the ICU, my nurse, Shelley, according to Pat, barely took her eyes off me long enough to blink. Notice Pat was actually trembling. Without making a big deal of it, Shelley wrapped a heated blanket over Pat's shoulders and softly whispered, "Here's a little bit of heaven for you." Her words and the gesture itself were simple. The comfort, immeasurable. See, I was necessarily the focus of attention, but at that time, I personally couldn't even give Patty an encouraging nod. So I can't begin to express how grateful I am as a husband for Shelley for the kindness to my wife. And you understand this was all first day stuff. The examples go on and on. Chaplain Steve, who constantly listened, prayed, and never seemed rushed to get to the next room. A member of housekeeping who always had a quick, pleasant comment. My post-op nurse, Eileen, who not only gave me excellent medical attention, but skillfully reminded me through involved conversation that I have an identity beyond my heart condition. In fact, in writing this, we were overwhelmed with examples, with people's names we wanted to mention, or tiny incidents involving staff whose name we never heard, but whose actions were so caring. SSM really does have a great thing going here. Somehow, SSM has created a working environment that encourages all staff to use their gifts on behalf of the patients, the people who come in your doors. God gives everyone gifts. Dr. Thomas used his gifts when he kept fighting for my life. The whole medical team's gift got this man who shouldn't have made it 24 hours all the way to surgery. Clearly, Dr. Noto used his gifts when he did a triple bypass on my still beating heart, and the smaller use of the gifts of thoughtfulness or compassion, the moments that surround the incredible medical achievements, all work together to give SSM its exceptional reputation. A couple of last points. After my successful triple bypass, which remember I wasn't really predicted to make it too much less through, a smiling Dr. Thomas told my wife, "I hope you and your family realize this is nothing short of a miracle." Well, Doc, we believe in miracles. And certainly we praise God for this one. But we also believe that God often works his miracles. through the hands of the people who bothered to apply his gifts. And we're so thankful St. Clare does. And lastly, I suspect SSM keeps all sorts of statistics, but I wonder if there are stats regarding who volunteers here and why. How many of your current volunteers or their loved ones were once patients here? Patients who were treated as people and now want to be able to reach out to others in similar ways. Pat and I are filling out our volunteer applications. My physically stronger heart allows me to do so. Our emotionally impacted hearts compel us to. Again, thank you for both.